Da, 아주 다들 잘함토니 세신베게 아주 캠보게의 신이나 바래 다나시
I'd
미세
like to offer all the Kempos and teachers and who are listening over the internet, as well as in particular all of the nuns who are at the different nunneries, as well as the monks from in particular Chödrak students from monasteries, and everyone else who's listening to this broadcast who have faith and devotion. I would like to offer you my welcomes before I begin the teaching. So today, the point we have come to our teaching is the second of the three main sections of the good deeds, the section called The Nature of the Biography. And so the other day I just talked about these first two major sections. So the second of these two is the nature of the nature of the biography. When we talk about the nature of the biography, this has two different parts. The first of these two parts is the preliminaries, how to enter the Dharma. And the second is the main part, how we practiced the paths of the three types of individuals. And of these two, first, the preliminaries, how to enter the Dharma. This is the point where we're at now. And this has, in terms of its subdivisions, it has 6 different points. And so to introduce what these different points are, the first is the meaningful deed of a supreme Nirmanakaya. The second is abandoning the impediment to Dharma negative friends. The third is the favorable condition following great spiritual friends. The fourth is abandoning meaningless distractions. The fifth is giving up on this life because impermanence has taken root in his being. And the sixth is going for refuge to the undeceiving 3 jewels. So these are the 6 points. And so the first of these is the meaningful deed of a supreme Nirmanakaya. So this meaningful deed of the supreme Nirmanakaya, if we talk about the root text first, reads, once I had gained a human life with leisures and resources, I dared not squander it pointlessly with single-minded focus. I did all I could to practice Dharma, just as the Buddha taught. I subjugated forcefully any wrong thought that arose. I think of this as one of my good deeds. So those are that is the root verse. Now this stanza what this stanza teaches is how Mikadorje took birth in a human body, how he entered the gate of the Buddha's teachings and took the vows, the pratimoksha vows, the bodhisattva vows, and the tantric vows, and how he focused his actions of body, speech, and mind in order to practice virtue and give up misdeeds, as the Buddha taught. And in this way, how he made his human life meaningful. And so in this text, the good deeds, there are 33 good deeds, and this is the first of these 33. So generally, in order to speak about how Mikadorje took birth in a human body, first we need to understand or I would like to speak in general about the prophecy that was made by the seventh Karmapa Chödrak Gyatso. In general, the seventh Karmapa Chödrak Gyatso had a pure vision that the gurus, Yidams and Dakinis, and in particular Ujjain Padmasambhava, made a prophecy that if he spent 3 years in retreat and did appropriate practices, he would be able to live to the age of 88. And so he went to Kompo, and in the year of the rat, 1505, he spent a few months in retreat. He did have plans to spend a long time in retreat, but the people of Kompo had a great desire to have an audience with him. And the monks in the encampment, since the Karmapa was spending a long time in retreat, and the Karmapa was in retreat, they were not receiving many offerings, and they were running out of food. And so they insisted he grant audiences on the new year of the tiger in 1506. So they made this request repeatedly. And at that time, Chödrak Gyatso said, if you have a cow, or if you have a milk, you can have the milk of them, but instead, if you eat it, are you going to eat it? So he said to him, are you choosing to eat the meat without milking the cow? And so this is what he said. And so anyways, he left his retreat on the 7th day of the first month of the tiger year. And on the 14th day, there was a gathering of about 100,000 people from the area of Kongpo. And in that gathering, he said, what Chödrak Gyatso said is that I have now dissolved my Nirmanakaya, and so now this is my sambhogakaya form. And he put on a crown made of pearls and pearl jewelry, and wearing these, he granted an audience. The next morning, when the sun was just about to arise, without any illness at all, he passed away. Before he passed away, he left a testament that was a few stanzas long. I can't read the whole thing, but it says, I have no birth, but will display a birth, as it says. And so he left this testament of a few stanzas in length. Also, he wrote in scrolls, several scrolls, the place where he would be reborn, the names of his parents, and so forth. And he said, give this to Gyatso, give this to Situ. And so he left in them, like he said, but they weren't envelopes, but he wrote down who the two were for, and he left them on his table. And so this is what is said. So now the Karmapa Mikadorje. Now the region where Mikadorje was born, so generally, if we think about the names of I thought I should give you an introduction to the birthplaces and the dates and so forth of the first 6 Karmapa, so I haven't had time to prepare that. So since tomorrow is a day off, I will give that tomorrow. But I would like today to give a brief introduction to the birthplace of Mikadorje. This was in Upper Dokam, at a location near the monastic seat of Karma Monastery. in the valley where the sixth Karmapa Tongwanden was born in Nomsagan. And so in that area, there's another valley called Kartipuk in that area. And within that, there was a village called Satam. And in that Satam, he had his father named Champa, which everyone in the area called him Dali. His mother was the granddaughter of a disciple of Karmapa Deshin Shakpa named Kachapa Namko Gyatso, who was a great Mahasiddha. So she was his granddaughter. Her name was Dongsa Lama Dren. Now, there's a little bit of a debate about who Mikadorje's father was. And the reason for this is some people say that it was someone named Sir Chadalwai Champa. And then also in the autobiographies, it says Ajam. And so it's both. So in Mikadorje's autobiographical account of the past actions of Mikadorje, there's a text named that, and in this he said that his father was Sir Chadalo Champe Shinyen, who had received teachings on Mahamudra from the seventh Karmapa Chödrak Gyatso. But it could be that he was just his biological son. But the father, his father, the head of the family who actually raised him, was Ajahn. And so there is a bit of debate about who his father actually was. And so on the 10th day of the 12th lunar month in the year of the female hare, there was like a spheres of light. And these fell onto the roof of the mouth, and they came in through the windows, and they made a big vows, and inside the house they stayed in there a long time. And it was as if like the sun was shining inside the house. And all the members of the family saw this. And so at that point, that is probably the time when Mikadorje entered his mother's womb. And so this is what his mother and father decided. Now at that time, when someone enters the moment of conception isn't something you can test the way you can today. In any case, when he entered his mother's womb, she had many wondrous dreams, and there are many different signs. I cannot explain them all, and it's not necessary, but to give an example of them. When he entered his mother's womb, his mother had a dream that there is a mountain in front of their house, and in front of that there is a large plain. And it was covered with colorful flowers. In the middle of that, there was a really beautiful tent. And inside of that tent, there are all sorts of statues and sacred texts and so forth, and many infinite varieties of offerings. And this is what she dreamed. And so then, inside and outside of the tent, there was like pieces of white conch that were like in the shape of stupas, and these fell in like a rain. And it was like around the mountain there was like a tent of rainbows, and there was like a turquoise-colored mist floating around. And around the tent, there are many different boys and girls adorned with jewels and carrying many ornaments. They're carrying symbols and various other offerings, and like they're dancing and singing and circumambulating the tent. And his mother also put herself many different bone ornaments and also danced. And so also, among all of the and within the tent, among all of the offerings, there was a golden vajra. She dreamt that it was there, and she dreamed that she took it in her hand. And she also saw another woman who had glossy black locks, and she was wearing white cotton clothes. She had a really beautiful, nice white conch, which is something like really, really beautiful white conch. And then the mother took the conch, and when she blew it, the sound of that conch was just so beautiful, and it lasted a really long time. And it was extremely loud. And so that's how it seemed to her in the dream. And then inside of the tent, there was a throne. And so she dreamt there was a throne, and then on that, she saw a monk on that. And the monk said to her, said, everyone in India and Tibet and everyone in Jambu has heard the sound of the conch that you blew. And so this is another, she had this feeling that's happened in her dream too. And outside of the tent, there were many people gathered. And she dreamed that the father, Ajam, was carrying a money praying wheel and leading everyone and singing the money melody. And so he began it, and then everyone else joined him in singing the money melody. And then the monk on the throne who had spoken to her earlier gave his mother a mala, and that has like the guru bead, or the knot that holds the knot closest, is made out of conch, and he gave it to her and said, "I'm giving this to you, so you recite manis with this." And so she had this appearance, and then once then she began to recite manis, and then immediately everyone around her gathered and joined her, and there was like this really clamoring sound of the manis. And so within that, she woke up. When she woke up, she still had the feeling that the mala that she had been given was still in her hand. And it still seemed to her that she could still hear the sound of many people outside reciting the 6-syllable mani mantra. And so she had these feelings too. When that happened, it's like her body was like caressed or being enveloped by feelings of pleasure. And she felt great joy, she said. And so she had many amazing dreams like that one. So at that time, one thing I need to introduce to everyone, to all of you, is that when most of the Karmapas took birth, the parents and various other people had many different appearances. And one of these is that they're often related to white conch shells, like blowing a white conch or finding a white conch. And so these sort of signs often happen. And so this happened for most of the rebirths of the Karmapas. And so this seems to be, I think this is a particular sign that the Gyawan Karmapa is being reborn in that family and in that house. And so basically, in brief, from the time he entered the womb until he was born, so everywhere, inside and outside their home, there was always like the sound of the many people reading scriptures, or sort of like a rumbling sound of the 6 scriptures, and everyone around there in the family heard this. And when other people saw his mother, they often saw her like radiating lights of many colors. Or people would have like visions of the house being surrounded by flames on the outside. And so there are many such signs as that as well. And one day, his mother went to gather firewood. Somebody said the word for firewood. I couldn't. The Tibetan word it's actually an old dialect word. And so we, in my own language, sometimes we would burn firewood. We wouldn't always burn wood, but sometimes we would have a type of wood called suru. Also, so sometimes, excuse me. So actually, it was maybe not. Sometimes in my region, we'd go up onto the mountains, we'd gather bundles of grass and tie them together and use them as firewood. At any rate, his mother went to get this, and she got tired, and she lay down to rest for a bit. And once she'd lain down, from within her belly, she heard a voice saying, "Don't just sit there. Keep going. It's going to hell." She heard the voice saying that. And she felt uncomfortable and thought, "Is that my dead sister?" So basically, he said, "Don't sit there. It's going to hell. There's going to be a hailstorm." And she heard a very high and faint voice saying this. And his mother felt a little bit uncomfortable about that. So she thinks, "Is that my dead sister? Was she reborn as a ghost? And is that her saying that?" So she felt uncomfortable about that. And at that time, there was someone next to his mother. She said, "Did you say something to me? What did you say to me?" And when she said, "I didn't say anything, but it's someone's voice. It scared me." And so then they went home quick. And as soon as they got inside, a really big hailstorm started. And so there's also that story. Then one afternoon, it was like in the afternoons one day, his mother heard a really clear sound of Om Mani Padme Hum coming from her belly. And a nun who was nearby also heard it. And so this is another story that's told. And another strange story is one time, his father and mother got into a domestic argument. They got in a fight. And when they got in a fight, the father picked up we have like fry pans. He picked up the handle of a frying pan and he hit the mother with it. And everyone, then the sound came from the mother's stomach saying, "You don't need to do that to us, mother and child. We didn't do anything." So he heard that sound. And everyone in the family heard that that voice clearly. So generally, for regular people, when a baby is in the womb, it can't speak. But whether this is like a miracle or an emanation, he was able to speak. And I think that's how it was. So at that time. And so at that point, he had to speak at those points. So he did it through an emanation. So these are all things that happened with his mother. Now with his father. So one time, he went to go to load the harvest in the fields. And when he was coming back, he saw like just as if it's real, not like a dream, but just real. He saw in the middle of many people and many animals, pack animals. And among those, there was a person with a young white mule carrying a box. And the man himself was wearing all sorts of bone ornaments. And that person, and he had a bag with many sacred objects, and he opened that up, and he took out of that a black crown made of rainbow light, and he said, "I'm giving this to you." And he seemed to put it in the Harmon's hand, and then everyone disappeared. And when this situation, and he felt like it actually happened, when he got back home, he said, "I saw this sort of person." And I had a vision of him like giving this to me. I have no idea what happened. They all disappeared. And everyone said, "Oh, we must have met a ghost." And so they immediately started doing repulsion and other rituals. And so this is another story that happened. And not only that, even the neighboring villagers also had wondrous dreams, and this happened quite frequently. So in brief, so now the date of Mikadorje's birth was the 4th day of the 11th lunar month, the female fair here. So this is probably in 1507, I think. And on that day, his mother gave birth to him without feeling any discomfort or any suffering at all. And as soon as when he immediately sat up, and he ripped his face, he wiped his face from his head down to his face. He did this, wiped him, stuff like that. Then he yawned a little bit, and he yawned a bit like that. And then said, but not very clearly, I'm the Karmapa, I am the Karmapa. He said this 2 or 3 times. And at that time, on that day when he was born, the sky was filled with rainbows, there's a rain of flowers, and a really nice scent of incense wafted. And in particular, from the roof of the house, there was like a rainbow that rose like in a column up into the middle of the sky. And his mother also gave off many scents for many days. Now, the day that Mikadorje was born, and according to this is a man named Emperor Zhengde. In the old history, it's called Jingde. But his actual name is Zhengde. So the day of this emperor's coronation was the same day as Mikadorje's birth. Now, this Ming emperor the reason why I have to say this now is that he was a little bit different than others. Because he said he was the incarnation of the Karma, or an emanation of the Karmapa. He said, I'm an emanation of the Karmapa. And this is described in the histories. And he said he was the emanation of the Karmapa. And he sent messengers bearing golden letters to invite Mikadorje to China. And so there are a lot of history about that, but I'll speak about this the day after tomorrow. Now, these are not recorded in Tibetan, but there's a lot about it in Chinese. So I thought I'd kind of compile it all and explain it to you, and I thought that would turn out well. So basically, after he was born, in Mikadorje's own account of his lives or his past actions, he says, because I said, Om Mani Padme Hum, Karmapa Karma, and A'ai, just because of that, some of the people gathered there said, this birth is the rebirth of the omniscient Karmapa Chödrak Gyatso. And that is what he said himself. So after he was born, many people just imagined it came without information. They came to see him. And so he was born in Ngom. So he came to Ngom, and there was a lot of rumors that the Karmapa had been reborn in Ngom. And this just naturally, that the fame of this naturally spread all over. Now, on the 13th day of the same month in which Mikadorje was born, then Situtashi Paljor came to that same area. It was at the same time. When these two happened together, then the father named Ajar went to see Siddhartha and said, oh, sir, he said, I have a really amazing baby. It's been born in my family. The baby himself says that he is the rebirth of Karmapa. He says it himself. So what is this? And when he asked this, then immediately, Siddhartha had the prediction letter from the previous Karmapa. He immediately looked at it. And as he looked at it, he then asked questions. He said, he asked, what are his parents' names? On the top of the house, or on the roof of the house, is there a pile of cypress wood? Is there a spring below it? And does the door of the house face to the house, or face to the east? And the father said, my name is Ajam. The mother is Lama Drin. And there is a pile of cypress on the roof, and there's a spring below. And the door does face east. And so the Siddha said, your names are not the same, but everything else is the same. Because according to the Testament, the father should be named Champa, and the mother should be named Lama Tso. That's what it's written. So these are just a little different. As I mentioned before, there's a little bit of debate about the father's name, as I mentioned, right? So one says that the father was named Chödrak Gyatso, and one was this Ajam. There are these two people who are said to be the fathers. They both have the name Cham in the same spelling in their names. But the names are not 100% the same. So perhaps. So I think it's probably was the Sir Chadalawa. So basically the father's name is a little different. And since he was born in the first year, there's going to be a big obstacle to his life, or a bit of an obstacle to his life. So Karmapa Rinpoche said that he should be kept secret until the third lunar month of the year of the dragon. So Karmapa gave this and other instructions and advice: 7 sacred relic pills, a square cloth, like a tub of butter, a brick of tea, a handful of incense, both black and white mixed together. And so he gave all of these and he said, burn this incense and put these pills in his mouth. If he is a tulku, and if he's actually tulku, nothing is going to happen. If he isn't, if he's not the tulku, then there'll be a sign tomorrow. And so maybe one night, he might. It's possible that he might say a few things tonight, and if he does, just come back here again to see me again, and tell me what I said. And so the father did as Siddha Rinpoche instructed him, burned the incense, put the sacred pills in his mouth, and said, they say you're the rebirth birth. And Kippa said he's giving these to you. And then the tulku at that point said, and when he said that, then, so these cloths, the gifts of cloths and stuff is just a little bit late. Emaho, do not have any doubt in me. I am called the Karmapa, he said. And he also said a few other verses, but the father didn't remember them. And so this is what they said. And then after this, then the Siddha Rinpoche sent a patron named Sokye to examine the tulku. And when he was examining, there was many people gathered around. And at that place, Mikadorje said the 6-syllable Mani mantra 7 times. There's another Ngomsa Gampa. The place was very close to a monastery, the Ngomsagang monastery. Now, this was founded by a Karma Kagyu student, but at that point, its lineage was in the Geluk lineage. Now, the monk said, we are not going to be partisan for the Gelukpa. The master of our monastery is the Karmapa. So tomorrow, let's get some tea, some butter, and everything together. And let's go to see Dali. So Dali, Ajam was also called Dali, right? So go to where Dali's son, who's said to be the Karma, is. Let's go see who he is. So they went to see. Well, when they went, the tulku seemed like he was really happy. And he said very loud, he said the Mani mantra and the Ali Kali mantra and so forth. And everyone who was there said, it's amazing that a newborn baby like that can speak. We go for refuge. And so they felt faith. And then later, when he was maybe 3 months after that, the tulku had two tiny teeth. They were the size of the mustard seeds. So he had two of these tiny teeth. And the father touched them and he said, you've got these teeth. Are these new teeth? I think these must be monster teeth for eating your seedlings, right? And that very same night, the two teeth disappeared. They just disappeared. And from that time, this is like a bad coincidence. And from that one, it's like his tongue was a little bit inflexible. And so from that later, his speech was a little bit uncomfortable. His tongue was not so flexible. And so this continued even later into his life. So in brief, the main point is that from the time he was born, in immediately on, he spoke in verse, he spoke in prose, he identified monks and others from the past. He could tell the stories of people he'd never met before. He said mantras, including the Mano mantra. He sat cross-legged. And so he had many different expressions of his body, speech, and mind that everyone who saw them were just really believed. But I don't have time to relate them all now. So in brief, the Karmapa, so it's undisputed to everyone that this is the Karmapa, and so for that reason. So in that region, the most powerful and the most wealthy area of that monastery, there were three different places. One was Ryoche, one was Florong, and one was Gyatunpa. And so these were the three. And after not so very long time, he was invited to the Ryoche monastery of Taplon Chitang and invited to Florong. And he received this invitation letter. And so when the tulku was only 7 months old, he went to Ryoche. And so this is like a big major seat of the Tatlung days, the Tatlung subject. So he went to Ryoche. And at Ryoche at that time, the master that was Jigten Wangchuk. Now Jigten Wangchuk was extremely kind to Mikadorje. At the beginning, he took care of him. And he gave him food and clothing and so forth. And this is one way that he showed him great kindness. And later, there were two tulkus, an eastern and a western. And at that point, then Ryoche Jigten Wangchuk gave unconditional support to Mikadorje, the Eastern Tulku. And so you could say he was very kind to Mikadorje, or that he had a very great connection to Mikadorje. But in that, the past activities of Mikadorje that he'd written, said that Jigten Wangchuk was actually a little bit violent. Actually, the reason is that for every year he had like a big military gathering every year, and they'd have medicine. So they did many other violent activities, and because if he did that, even though he didn't really lose faith in Mikadorje, but it's like he just said, I didn't have much. His faith didn't really get very strong, other than just saying, "I'll go for refuge." But when Mikadorje was 1 year old, he had a dream that he went into a house. with made a house with many different stories. And so within that, and on the sort of Ryuchi Jigten Wonchuk was upstairs, and so we wondered, how is this? And we went up to see how it was. When he was upstairs in the middle of this, and so there was on a lotus and moon seed was the body of Avalokiteshvara, shining rays of light. And so when he woke up, when Mikadorje woke up from this dream, he thought to himself, even though Ryuchi Jigten Wonchuk, even at that time he had already passed away, but when he was alive, he had engaged in a lot of war and a lot of such activities. But the people where he was around, whether that's Sakya or Geluk or Kagyu or Bompa, when he said Ryuchi Jigten Wonchuk, felt faith in him as if he were Avalokiteshvara. They joined their hands between their forehead and heart and had that such faith for them. And so for that reason, and so I thought this is really, and at that point, he felt, oh, this is someone who could really take care of him. And so this happened when he was 31, when Mikadorje was 31 years old, that he had this dream. This is when he was 31. And so when Mikadorje was a baby and went to see Jigten Wonchuk, Jigten Wonchuk examined it and said, in the end, he said that you need to have there's no need to have any doubt that this is the Karmapa. And he said to the monks of Florompa, he said to please offer service well to the mother and child. And after that, and so at that point, then the community in Florompa, so he introduced the mother and the tulku to the community of Florompa. Then when he was 9 years old, or 9 months old, when he was 9 months old, he was brought to, the tulku was brought to Florongzong. And from that time until he was 6 years old, the tulku sort of shuttled back and forth between Zongsar and Hlolong and Ryuche. So he went to various different places in these places. And he did many different ways he benefited beats. And there are many different stories about this, but there's so many of them, and if I had to tell them all to you, you'd all get bored. So now let's take a break here, and then when we reconvene, I thought I would speak a little bit about the dispute between the tulkus from the east, dispute about the tulkus from the east and the west. So now I will continue speaking with all of you. The 8th Karmapa Mikadorje. And before he was enthroned as the Karmapa, there were actually 2 candidates who were said to be the reincarnation of Mikadorje. One was the tulku Mikadorje himself, who was born in Ngom, and then there was one who was born in the region of Kompo, who was also said to be that. And so there was a dispute as to which of these 2 was the reincarnation of the Karmapa. And some people think that so some people think that this is so now, since we have the so that there is a situation where the 16th Karmapa, there are 2 or 3 different people who are recognized as the tulku of the 16th Karmapa. And so and people think that this is unprecedented and something that you can't get on your mind, can get their minds around. And so they think that, and so we should understand that actually this happened before in history. And so I think this is something that we can understand and think about it. and understand this. Now, one different situation, though, is that at the time of the Mikadorje, there was the great encampment of the Kagyu, and that had not yet dispersed. And this was very well known not only in the central Tibet, but all throughout all of Tibet. And it was like the main center of the Kagyu was this Karmapa Gyatso. And so in terms of if someone is not recognized with the Karmapa Gyatso, is the Karmapa by the Karmapa Gyatso, someone is not recognized with the Karmapa Gyatso, if only a few lamas or a few monasteries recognize someone as the Karmapa, there is no way that student could be, or that tulku could be recognized as the Karmapa. And so at that time, Mikadorje had been reborn, and not only that, it had become rather widely known around in the area of Kam that he was the reincarnation of the Karmapa. And so the question is, how was he examined by the Gyatso? So how is it that the situation where there was the dispute with the Amdo Tulku from Kongpo? Now in the Gyatso, the representative of the Karmapa, or the regent of the Karmapa, was Gyatso Tulku Tashi Namgyal. This is the second Gyatso Rinpoche, Gyatso Tulku Tashi Namgyal. And so one day, there was a lama named Lama Sunam who came to Gyatso Rinpoche, and he said, "I have some really good news for you." So the people say these days, good news. So he said, "I've heard, I have good tidings." That's what we call these days good news. So last night, someone came to me. This person says that it's certain that the reincarnation of Chödrak Gyatso was reborn in the area of Ngom. And so he came to give these good news to Gyatso Rinpoche. And when he gave that, the sun shone on the tent, and his tea had just been poured into his cup, and these three all happened at the same time. And so Gyatso Rinpoche thought, these are good interdependence. However, at that time, there was an Amdo Lama. He was kind of a crafty fellow. He was kind of a bit audacious. And he had a son. When the son was born, the parents also had some good dreams and saw some good signs. And so they kind of trained the child to say, "Oh, I'm the tulku." Or they took him to the area of Kompo Draksum and he said say he was the Karmapa's reincarnation. And so the Amdo Lama was rather crafty. And so at that time, at that point, the people in the grander companies, most of them were from the area of Kompo. And so the people of Kompo and the encampment had a lot of, he gave them all a lot of food and a lot of beer and so forth. And so he did many things to get the people from the encampment on his own side. Not only that, there's also a student of the Chödrak Gyatso called Kyase Dunden, and he invited him and got him to recognize the Amdo Tulku as the reincarnation of Karmapa Chödrak Gyatso. Gyatso Dunden said, so Gyatso Tokten must have pretended that it was. And so Gyatso Tokten, after a month or two later, Gyatso Tokten passed away. So Gyatso Rinpoche when Gyatso Rinpoche looked in the testament and that was left by the Karmapa Chödrak Gyatso, he had great faith that it was the Tulku Borden Ngom who was the Karmapa. But most of the people in the most of the members of the encampment were on the side of the encampment, and so Gyatso Rinpoche had no point to do. He went to Kompo Jaksum and he had no choice but to go visit the Amdo Tulku. And at that point, Gyatso Rinpoche gave 3 katas to the Amdo Tulku. And each of them, the Tulku gave back. And so this is not such a good sign, not such good interdependence. And so he was not comfortable with that. And this is the actual truth. The old times. These days, this is the old tradition. These days, people immediately put the kata back on you. These days, in the old days, in the old days, it was supposed to. And so you would give a kata, and then if they were going to give one back, they would take another kata and put it you. They wouldn't do it. So, like if you're giving the same kata, you're putting back, it's saying, "I don't need this." It's like disrespectful. And so that was the old custom. In these days, there's no one who knows about that way of doing it these days. In any case, and so from the very beginning, Gyatso Rinpoche really didn't feel very good about the Amdo Tulku, but at that point, because of the there's a Tung Tashi Dundrup, who was the sort of the head of the encampment, and Tashi Gyatso Rinpoche had come to him, and so they talked about what they could do. And so he was very skillful about this. They invited the Amdo Tulku to Kompo Tselakam. Now, this is a very important place, and the reason this is an important place is that
Karmapa tusum kembane songde dapaji Karmapa kudin chube barge kuju chaze tamjialo ane daji Kompo Tselakam ya shudi are chezang Kompo Tselakam.
So Kompo Tselakam was with all of the treasuries of the first to the 6th Karmapas were all kept at Kompo Tselakam. And so it's a very important monastery. It was like the treasury. And so he brought the Amdo Tulku to Kompo Tselakam. And he had the Amdo Tulku do a bit of a retreat there. And Gyatso Rinpoche then, what he looked at is when he examined his dreams, the dream that he had was that from the west, all of the areas in the west were like black and rather unpleasant looking. All of the regions to the east were filled with the light and very beautiful. And so he had a dream where he saw it like that. Likewise, he dreamt that there was a lion who could not roar. And this lion who could not roar was in the west. But in the east, there was a grand dragon. And when it just gave its roar, the lion from the west immediately turned into a white dog. And so that was that sort of a sign that appeared in his dreams. And so for these reasons, so there was a lama, Rinpo Lama, who said that the Eastern Tulku was definitely the unmistaken lama. And likewise, Paotsula Chenga, when he was 9 years old, went to Tuchen Monastery, which is probably the region of Lhasa. And this is founded by the 7th Karmapa. And so at that point, there was a This is the head discipline master, and so this is a trimpun is the level. And this can also be used for political letters, but here it means the people in there. And so when Paotslo Trengwa had a conversation with that trimpun who was named Nirmanakaya, Nirmanakaya said to Paotslo Trengwa, so at that point, Paotslo Trengwa had some sympathy. So Paotslo Trengwa said, does this tulka have like a very kind of wild father? If he doesn't, if he does, the reason is, so we have, so because our tulku from Bogdan, he has a father who is really, really agitated, really, because he is really crafty. And so he has a really crafty father. And because what this crafty father says is, it says it's really easy to make a tulku. It's very easy to make a tulku, he says. Most people say, if you ask them, do you see, if people ask you, do you remember this Birthplace? You say, oh, I don't remember him. And if they ask you, do you not remember? And said, I don't remember him. They said, do you recognize him? I said, then you just say, I recognize you. If you say, do you not recognize me? I said, no, I don't recognize you. And other than that, you don't need to teach the child to say. If you teach the child to just say that, then it's enough. So you only just need, the child just needs to know a few sentences in order to become a tulku. And so when you've got a kind of, when you've got a really malevolent father, and so this is what the father had said. And so at that point, most of the people who had intelligence really, most of the intelligent people said that they had no doubt that the Western tulku was the Karmapa. The father was doing all sorts of things. And so so this is something that Paotslo Trengwa said himself. The people who were in the know knew that it was the Western tulku. But in the actual situation that happened is that, and so what happened at that time is that from Utsang there was a Desa Bhaktapa and Samba and a retreat master, Samba Dunya, from the encampment. So he was in Tsangpa, so, and also Gyatso Toko. And Rinpoche is from Tsurpu and Karma, as well as many monks and lamas and patrons of the Karmapa took a great interest in the son of the Amdo Lama. But no one from the encampment took much interest in the parents of the actual tulku or the parents in their family. And so for that reason, for the family, their food and clothing became very scarce. And they had to live as beggars. They faced great hardship. And so generally, all of the Karmapas, mostly before the Karmapa, had been recognized at a very early age. And they were taken care of and enthroned. So there weren't any of them who had to wait until they were the age of 7. But the 8th Karmapa, until he was 7 years old, there was no one no one took care of him. And so he had a lot of difficulties with food and clothing. This only happened to Mikadorje. It didn't happen to any of his predecessors. Likewise, Mikadorje also several times had illnesses that nearly caused him to die. But at that point, they didn't have the resources to get any medicines or doctors and couldn't do anything about it. And so it was a very difficult situation. So at that time, so Mikadorje, what he thought to himself was, when he was very little. So these days, he said, once you're named a Rebirth or a tulku, you can't do anything for the sake of future lives. You have to spend all your time only working for this lifetime. In this lifetime, you don't even have under control of your own food and clothes. You have to follow for other people, your stewards and so forth. And so it's like you're caught in the great mire of suffering. So let that Ando tulku be taken care of, he said. And let me be considered an ordinary person. And if I'm not given the name Karmapa, in the future, I'll go to a monastery in Utsang in central Tibet and practice listening and contemplating and meditation in the same way as the great masters of the past did. And in that way, I'll do whatever I can to restore the teachings that have been lost and to benefit sentient beings. And so he thought about that. He thought he was kind of happy. I don't have to be the Karmapa. It's kind of nice. And so he was kind of happy about it, as he said to others later. But at that point, at that time, the members of the many people said, even if so many of the students of the previous Karmapa, even though everyone else had a lot of interest of Karmapa, they did a divination. These students of the yoga, previous Karmapa good yogas, did a divination. So this is like where there's like it's really inhabited by the students. But at that point, there wasn't a particular person whom they entered. They would take like they take a young boy and bring that boy, and then they would have Mahakala Virgin bless him and then possess the boy, and then make them give a pharmacy. So that was prophecy. So that was the custom at that time. So these students of the previous Karmapas, who were good yogis, took a good joy, and they made him be possessed by Mahakala Bernak Chen. And then at that point, the prophecy he gave of this Tulku is someone that the Emperor of China and all the people of this world will recognize and have faith in as the Karmapa. And so this is the prophecy that was given. And similarly, at that time, there were some great masters who were well known to have some samadhi and some clairvoyance, and who had visions of deities. And they said that it's that Eastern Tulku is the rebirth of the Karmapa. And they all recognized this, and they all believed this. Likewise, the Western Tulku, the one from Kompa, was just making a lot of noise about it. But when you examined him, but they couldn't find any reasons why he was a Tulku when they actually examined him. Similarly, all of the area where Mikadorje was born, from Ngom and Ryoche and Florumpa, they all sent a letter to the encampment. This is the actual encampment. And so it's best if you recognize and enthrone him, as was done in the time of the seventh Karmapa Chödrak Gyatso. And from that condition, this Eastern Tulku, when then only at that point, when the Eastern Tulku was he invited by Gyatso Rinpoche to the encampment. And they sent people from the encampment to welcome and to be incense bearers from. Now these representatives from the empowerment, what they said is to them first, we haven't decided who is the Tulku, they said, and so we're going as representatives of the Karma. And since this isn't decided, so don't prostrate it, don't ask for any blessings, hand blessings, or offer any kinds of. So they made a rule, and so then they went to welcome him. But in the past, during the time of the Buddha, first the Buddha and the good group of his five first disciples, they had when they had practiced austerities all together, and in the end, when the Buddha gave up practicing experience, the group of five were disappointed, and so they made a rule that if they met the Buddha again, they would not prostrate, they wouldn't welcome him, they wouldn't spread out a mat for him, they wouldn't let him sit at the head of the rows. But when they actually met the Buddha, these rules just automatically fell by the wayside. Likewise, when the lamas and monks of the encampment actually met the tulku, their perception changed involuntarily, and they all prostrated. They all offered contas and asked for handouts. They did everything they said they weren't going to do. And at that point, he also recognized almost all of the old monks and students of the previous Karmapa and called them by their names. He said, "This is you, this is that." And when they went, and everyone remembered how it was during the time of the seventh Karmapa, Chödrak Gyatso, and they shed tears from the power of faith. And they all supplicated him, and like everything was filled with a great joyous noise. Then on the first day of the first month of the year of the bird, now here I should have really given a little bit of a story. So then I should have put down what the Western year is, but I didn't do it. Anyway, so the first day, the first month of the year of the bird, he first met Gyatso Rinpoche. Now at that point, Gyatso Rinpoche and said to the Eastern Tulku, he said, "Do you recognize it? Who am I? Are the tents and the arrangements the same as they were in the past? And do you know who is the master of these tents?" And the Tulku said, "Yeah, I recognize you," said the Tulku. "You're a Noshri, aren't you? Nyewo Goshri, aren't you? You've let your hair grow long now. It wasn't so long before. So don't be so nervous about it. So don't act so nervously. The arrangement of the tents is just like before. And you're the master of the tent, aren't you?" And so this is what the Karmapa said. So at that point, it was like probably during a Losada ceremony, and for that point, so the seventh Karmapa, Chödrak Gyatso's throne and seat and canopies and curtains and cups and everything were all arranged out there. And since there's the Ajahn goes just to put his right foot up there in order to go up on the throne, as if like up on the throne. And so everyone got panicked and tried to stop him. And so all of these, you had this like amazing qualities and confidence. He showed this, but still, the monks from the encampment said, "Oh, we still don't really know which one is the tulku, the Amdo boy or this tulku." So that's what it is. So they couldn't decide. And so they hadn't decided. The Eastern tulku, Mikadorje, right? Such a Ako Ata, someone named Ako Ata. Ako Ata was a student of the seventh Karmapa and the secretary of the encampment, Chanchu Rinchen. He said, I have some opinions that I'd like to talk with you two about. And none of you teachers and students in the encampment know how to have a discussion. You don't know how to make any plans. I've shown so many signs that I actually remember past lives. There have been so many signs and so many omens, but none of you understand anything, no matter how many signs I show. Actually, for these two candidates, they say, if you keep on saying, should we recognize this one? Should we say it? If you're always giving different things to try to do this, and you're always talking about this, if you always do that, how are you going to decide? How are you going to know which one is actually the Karmapa? Will anything good ever come of this? And also, Nyewo Goshri, that is Gyatso Rinpoche, he even doesn't have anything definite to say. You aren't confident in your boss, Gyatso Rinpoche, are you? So he said this to them. And when he said this, this little kid was saying these things like that, such big things like this is amazing. Well, they said, well, then how? So they said, well, how should we do it? How can we make a decision? And he said, you must decide the question with your mind. He said, you don't need to do various things. You need to decide in your own mind. And this is what he said. So at that time, he was 7 by Tibetan years, but if you count him in terms of the actual time they're going, it had only been 5 years and 3 months since he had been born. But he has such a like power of speech and such great intelligence, distinguishing the the positive and the negative, and was able to give such speak in this way. And so in the end, they couldn't just determine anything at all. So in the end, what happened is what they did is they brought both of the tulkus, the one from the east and one from the west, and they gathered many thousand people, and they had both of them in the center of these. And many people asked them questions and about the Dharma, about worldly affairs, but making them recognize people and recognize things. Who is a student of the seventh Karmapa? So they put two teacups, which one of those seventh Karmapas and one was not. So which of them was it? And sometimes they would criticize, sometimes they'd threaten them. And they'd do various things to try to test the two, so who it is. And so they're just in the front of so many people. And when they did this, and at that point, the Amdo Tulku was 7. He was actually 7-year-olds by Western counting. But his father and mother, he only knew his father's and mother's names. And he knew the names of food and clothing and stuff, but he didn't know anything else. And when he's trying to, whenever he was given something to recognize, he'd just take whatever came close and pick it up. Sometimes he'd start crying because the people would do this. So he was afraid, and he's crying. And the Amdo Tulku, his father, the Amdo Lama, was very crafty, and he said, and he had some bodyguards, and he brought so many nakpas and tantric priests, and so they all said, and they had them how to do various rituals and make sounds and so forth. And so this is Shachoka's. And so he was trying to make the Eastern Tulku afraid and do something. They did all these things to try to scare the Eastern Tulku, Mikadorje. And the Eastern Tulku, he wasn't afraid. He wasn't afraid, but at that day he was a little bit bored that day. There's no point to this, he thought. And he didn't recognize the things well. These things are like the things of the previous Karmapa or not. And there's the West Karmapa. And so they had like a whole table full of things that he took away. And so all the servants and all the supporters all said, we've won. They said, they had horse races, and they did a sang puja and all these different things. So that happened. Then the people I think Kapana said, it's like the Amdo Lama they were under his thumb because he gave beer to the ones who needed beer, gave meat to the ones who needed beer, butter to those who wanted butter. And by doing that, so he got them under his thumb, and so Gyatso Rinpoche couldn't do anything about it. He could say it's not like this, but he didn't really have any power. But actually, it was really difficult for Gyatso Rinpoche at that time. And this is a situation we can talk about later. It's a really very sad situation, but I'll speak about it later. In any case, Gyatso Rinpoche clearly couldn't do anything about it. He said, you Eastern Tulkus, you may be undisputed, but I haven't had any part. I don't have anything to do. So if you go to the people from Rebirth and the people from Florong and Gyatompa, you have the three people. They're all from the same area, right? So you bring the Shajal Tulku back to the Eastern Tulku back to your region, nothing's going to happen, he said to the people from Florong and these areas, from Mikadorje's homelands. So at that point, the people from the same area, from Florong and Jagun, the Karmapa says, someplace was a part of Florong and Gyarong. And what they said is that it's definite that he's the actual tulku. He is the real tulku, but still not enthrone him. And if that's how it is, then we're going to eliminate all the Westerners and their prince. They got together to go to battle and go to war. Like their Kamas said, we're gonna kill them all. So we're gonna take care of them all. And they're just about to attack, and they were just about to attack. The incumbents then got a little bit afraid. So the Kampas are like, if the Kampas finish us all off, then it's gonna be kind of hard, isn't it? So they had nothing to do. So they went to conduct a mission. They came to this. So we'll do exactly whatever you think, they said to Gyatso Rinpoche. They hadn't anything else to do. So when they said that, Gyatso Rinpoche made the last investigation on the 10th, the night of the 10th day of the second month. He prayed to the Yudam deities and to consider which was the tulku. And this is the last time, in the dream that he had. In the dream, the tulku, the Eastern tulku, Mikadorje, came to him with a kind of a little bit of an angry, like he was kind of offended. You seem to still have doubts in me. So what can I do for you? Do whatever you're going to do. And he stood in front of Gyatso Rinpoche, and he stood in front of Gyatso Rinpoche, and what Gyalpo Rinpoche thought at that point is that it's been a long time since the tulku arrived here. We didn't allow him to get on the throne. He's probably offended. He doesn't even have a cushion. What is the best cushion? When he thought about this, then immediately he saw that there was a seat, and he said that it said, "Please sit here." But in the dream, the tulku didn't listen and didn't sit down, and he left the tent. He went to his own tent. This is the vision that he had in his dream. Then a little bit later, a white-colored woman with matted locks, wearing robes of white silk, came before Gyatso Rinpoche with an amazing white conch that he'd never seen before. It's so big that even two people wouldn't be able to carry it. But she was carrying it on her right shoulder. And she came to Gyatso Rinpoche. And this woman said to Gyatso Rinpoche, I have blown this conch in every land. Its sound has been heard in every land. But you still aren't taking care of this conch. So what's that about? She stood there saying that. And she said, even I thought I should blow this conch, I can't. And so she went with the conch on her shoulder and went off in the direction where the tulku had gone. Then just a little bit after that, a woman with a kind of reddish skin and brown hair, and so like big bloodshot eyes appeared to him with a little bit kind of a wrathful appearance. And I said, don't you only listen to lies, she said. If you only listen to lies, there's a danger that you have a bad strength, that you get very ill. And so she said, warned him of the danger, and then went away. And so he had a vision like that. And so at that point, he developed faith that the tulku was the unmistaken karma. And even though everyone, as I said, on the 14th day of so it's a very beautiful, very fortunate day. And so they invited the Eastern tulku and they did the enthronement ceremony on that day. And when they did that enthronement ceremony, then on that same day, at that point, then all the members of the Karmapa said, naturally felt faith, and said, everyone said, something happened to us. Were we like were we like possessed, or have we come under the influence of the demons or something? What happened? So how did we make such a mistake like this? And so they all felt that they ended up thinking like that. In any case, in the very end, the Eastern Tulku Mikadorje was the Eastern Tulku, was recognized as the reincarnation of the seventh Karmapa Chödrak Gyatso. Where did the Western Tulku go? He even when Mikadorje had said this even before, when he was in the book, the Karmapa said, "He's not the Karmapa, he is one of mine. He is a Tulku from Surmang." And so for that reason, later he became known as this, recognized as the Surma Chesang Tulku, and stayed at the Dratsiluk monastery. And the Amdo Lama thought he should do something good, but the Amdo Lama came after the Amthadud. After Thamala, he just disappeared. Who knows what happened? He just fled. He ran away. And so at that time, Mikadorje thought he should do something nice for him, but he just disappeared and no one knew where he'd gone. So later, it seems that things didn't go very well before. Now, I don't really know exactly, but it's written that things didn't go well for him. And so that is how it is. And so in this way now, this is a sort of a brief account of the dispute that happened between the Eastern and the Western Tulkus at the time of the Mikadorje. And I think this is probably a good spot to leave it for today. So tomorrow is a day off. So since it's a day off, I'm maybe a little bit happy about that. So the day after tomorrow, then I'll continue teaching. And in particular, as I said today, I will speak about the birthplaces, birth dates, days of the dates that they passed away, of the first seven Karmapas. So, as I said before, I think it'd be good to speak about these the day after tomorrow. So now please prepare the dedications and aspirations.